Hi, this is Andrew with Front Range CNC. Today we're going to talk about auto tool changers, the different styles you'll see out there, as well as the benefits of an auto tool changer in general and the benefits of each different style of auto tool changer as well. This will be aimed at really any material or any product you're cutting. Anytime you can integrate an auto tool changer, you'll get your money out of it. I mean, I can almost guarantee on any machine. There's different styles of auto tool changers, and those are going to work depending on how the machine is actually designed and how that's built. The most important thing is, if you're thinking about not getting the tool changer in the beginning, is then you would want to make sure that the spindle that you're adding does have that capability. For example, there is a good cost savings if you do not use an auto tool change spindle, but the downside is that if you decided you wanted to try to add a tool changer later, your spindle would not have that ability to actually load and unload tools, so to say. So that's something that is helpful to keep in mind as you are purchasing that machine. Within the subset of auto tool changers, there's different styles, and I would say there's probably really three main styles of auto tool change racks, or just think about what's actually holding the tools. The first would be a linear rack. Typically these are fixed, and they're a long line, and there's tool, 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 tool. Normally you see these at the back of the machine. The only real general downside of this is if you were doing an auto loading function, it's harder to load that because your tooling is essentially in the way of where your machine's going to grab the sheets. You see this differently in terms of different companies. Some people are putting it lower under that table, and it's got a bit of a cover that it opens up and it gets the tool. Others have got a base maybe that's holding it, and it's moving with the machine. But just think of a fixed linear rack as, again, just being a straight piece in the back that's holding each of those tools in. The benefit of a fixed linear rack is that there's no additional motor being added, and there's no additional layer of component. So essentially, when you do a tool change in this setup, your machine is configured and knows that tool number 2 is here, tool number 10 is here, and to get to this point, it will go here, here, and then pick up the tool. And if it's doing tool number 10, it will offset that whole dynamic by that distance between the two. So typically that's a very simple setup. Another setup you'll see is called think about it, it looks like a fixed rack, but instead of it being at the back of the machine, it typically is going to ride under the bridge. And so as that machine moves forward and backward, it's riding with the machine just underneath. And then normally what will happen is it'll be on an air cylinder style setup that will come out, machine will get the tool, get the next tool, and then that air style will come back, and now it's still safely under the bridge of the machine. Keep in mind, in this example, the bridge of the machine is this piece here that's riding back and forth. One advantage is it's a little bit quicker. Your tooling is already right there, so it would save your machine maybe upwards of 10 feet of having to go back to where the tools are. A potential downside is you do now have an additional air component that's coming out. And so if that air is not pushing all the way, or maybe the PSI is a little low in one side versus the other, then your rack is now kind of coming out. All of these things are checked, of course, by your manufacturer, but it is just worth noting, if you don't need that, a fixed rack is kind of the easiest one in terms of troubleshooting and so on. Then the third style is a carousel. A carousel looks just like a merry-go-round setup, where it's got the tools, it rotates, and it normally is going to ride next to the machine. This style is popular because it does give you a fast tool change. So instead of your machine coming all the way to the back to get it, normally you'd have your little carousel would be riding on the side, and the machine would just come over, pick it up from the carousel, and that would rotate depending on what tool you need. So it would know that number 6 is 70 degrees over, and it'll rotate 70 degrees, pick up, and then keep going. The one advantage too on top of speed is normally you can fit more tools in a smaller footprint. There are machines out there that are combining a fixed rack or even an air actuated setup with a rotary carousel to give you both options. The downside of the rotary carousel is that you have got now an additional motor normally. I mean, it's possible this can be done off of a stepper motor style setup, but normally on larger industrial style machines, you've got now another motor, another servo that's going to be controlling that direction. So think about it as you're probably familiar with X, Y, and Z. That carousel may now be called an A axis. And that will then rotate the degrees. It'll come over and pick it up and move it. So this is a really good style for cabinetry because it allows the back of your machine to be open so that you can have the machine pick up a sheet, drag it onto the CNC and cut it, and that carousel is always on the side. It's never actually in the way. And so that would allow you to have an open level of travel. But again, keep in mind then that would just come at the offset of it being another mechanical component. So at Front Range, we have options for a fixed rack if you don't need an auto loading and unloading setup. And we also have got a rotary carousel if you do want to add an auto loading and unloading setup. We normally recommend if you can use the fixed rack, that's the easiest way. It's the most cost effective. But if you do need the ability to add that loading at a later date or even with that initial machine, then the rotary carousel really would be the way to go. All of these options, they would not impact, it would not impact what kind of spindle you have in terms of an ISO 30 versus HSK. Those would work. So as long as your spindle is a tool change style spindle, and really all that would mean is that in the spindle there's some mechanism of a ball bearing that would open and close that would be necessary for you to either drop a tool off or pick up another one. And so that really is kind of the complexity of that function. If you do have questions about tool changers or maybe which is best for you, feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Typically the difference in time between a rotary style setup and a fixed rack in the back is maybe 10 seconds or so for a tool change. And so it's one of those things that it's helpful to know what you're doing in the long term so we can try to make a setup that's going to work really well for you. But I would say generally, it's not something that's going to be a huge make or break between, if you're going to meet your output for sheets in a day or not. Some machines are very slow to go back. I mean, that can maybe add up over time, but our experience is that it's more so a functional thing and less about saving 10 seconds on that sheet or so on. If you wanted to save 10 seconds, send us your program. There's a high chance we can just improve your program by 10 seconds. So again, feel free to call, send us an email if you have questions about tool change setups and how they work, and we'd be happy to elaborate further. Thanks.